Before we begin, let me ask you something. If you discovered your spouse had been poisoning you for 18 months, slowly, methodically, with substances that mimicked natural illness, what would you feel? Betrayal? Rage? Fear? I felt all of those things. But more than anything, I felt clarity. Because when I found the laboratory analysis proving the arsenic levels in my blood, I didn't confront him. I did something far more calculated. I let him think he was winning. I'm Victoria Hayes, 29 years old, former pharmaceutical researcher. And when I uncovered my husband's plot to kill me for my grandfather's $40 million estate, I didn't call the police. I orchestrated his complete destruction in front of 300 witnesses at our company's annual gala. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. 18 months before the diagnosis, I stood in the gleaming research facility of Hayes Pharmaceutical Solutions, watching my husband Daniel present our latest cancer treatment breakthrough to the board. Daniel Hayes, brilliant chemist, charismatic speaker, and the man I'd married 3 years earlier when I was a naive 25-year-old graduate student and he was my department head. Phase 2 trials show a 73% remission rate, he announced, his smile dazzling the 12 board members. This could revolutionize pancreatic cancer treatment. I'd done most of the actual research. He'd taken most of the credit. But that's how it had always been in our marriage. My work, his glory. I told myself it didn't matter because we were partners, building something together. My grandfather, Edmund Hayes, had founded Hayes Pharmaceutical in 1967. He built it into a $2.3 billion empire before retiring in 2019. When he died in 2022, he left controlling shares to me, his only grandchild who'd actually pursued pharmaceutical science like he had. 51% of voting shares, locked in a trust until I turned 30 in exactly 6 months. Unless I died first. Then everything would pass to my spouse. Daniel knew this. He'd helped me review the estate documents when we got engaged. Your grandfather was brilliant, he'd said, kissing my forehead. Just like you. The first symptom appeared in October 2023. Nausea that wouldn't quit. I blamed it on stress from the clinical trials. Then came the fatigue, the muscle weakness, the burning sensation in my feet. My hair started thinning. By December, I could barely climb the stairs to our brownstone in Boston's Back Bay. You're working too hard, Daniel said, bringing me tea every morning and night. Special blend, he called it, imported from Taiwan. It tasted slightly metallic, but I drank it anyway because he seemed so concerned. 3 different doctors couldn't find anything wrong. Your blood work looks normal, they said. Maybe it's chronic fatigue syndrome. Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe you should see a therapist. Daniel was the perfect, devoted husband through it all. He drove me to appointments, held my hair when I vomited, researched possible diagnoses late into the night. The board members praised him constantly. You're so lucky to have such a supportive partner, they tell me a company functions while I struggle to stand without shaking. What they didn't know, what I didn't know yet, was that Daniel had been documenting my decline meticulously, building a case that I was mentally and physically incapable of managing grandfather's estate. He'd already consulted with 3 separate probate attorneys about expedited inheritance procedures for surviving spouses of incapacitated beneficiaries. My best friend, Rachel Kim, was the one who saved my life. She'd been my lab partner in graduate school before becoming a toxicologist at Massachusetts General Hospital. We met for coffee in January 2024. She had to help me walk from my Uber to the table. Victoria, you look like you're dying, she said bluntly. Rachel never sugarcoated anything. The doctors say it's stress. Bullshit. She pulled out her phone. I want to run some tests. Real tests. Not the standard panels your physicians are ordering. Rachel, I've been tested for everything. Not for heavy metal poisoning, you haven't. The words hung in the air. I laughed, uncomfortable. Why would anyone test for that? Her face was serious. Because I've seen 2 cases in the last year. Both women. Both slowly poisoned by partners who wanted insurance money. Both missed by primary care physicians because the symptoms mimic so many other conditions. I agreed to the testing just to humor her. 3 days later, she called me at 11 p.m., which was unusual. Rachel kept strict boundaries between work and personal life. Don't eat or drink anything Daniel gives you, she said without preamble. My blood went cold. What? Your arsenic levels are 4 times the normal range. Chronic exposure, not acute. Someone's been giving you small doses regularly for months. This is attempted murder, Victoria. I sat in my home office, staring at the tea Daniel had made me that evening. It sat on my desk, cooling, slightly metallic smelling. I thought about the last 18 months. The mysterious illness that no doctor could diagnose. Daniel's concerned face as he brought me food, drinks, supplements. His increasing control over my schedule, my medical care, my access to other people. I need to think, I told Rachel. No, you need to go to the police right now. And tell them what? That my toxicologist friend ran unauthorized tests. That my husband, who everyone thinks is a saint, is somehow poisoning me with no proof of how or why. Rachel was silent. She knew I was right. We needed more than elevated arsenic levels. We needed evidence of intent, of method, of motive. Give me 2 weeks, I said. I'll figure this out. What Rachel didn't know, what Daniel definitely didn't know, was that I'd spent the last 6 months documenting everything for a completely different reason. I'd been investigating financial irregularities at Hayes Pharmaceutical, missing research funds, suspicious equipment purchases, data from clinical trials that didn't quite match our published results. I'd started investigating because I took my grandfather's legacy seriously. I discovered a pattern of fraud that went back 2 years, right around when Daniel and I got married. Now I understood. He hadn't married me for love. He'd married me for access. And when marrying me wasn't enough to control the company, he decided to kill me for it. I had 2 advantages Daniel didn't know about. First, my grandfather had been paranoid about corporate espionage. Every computer in our house had hidden backup systems that logged every keystroke, every file access, every email. I'd installed them myself and never told Daniel they existed. Second, I wasn't actually as sick as I appeared. The arsenic poisoning was real, but now that I knew what it was, I could counteract it. Rachel prescribed me chelation therapy secretly, medication that would bind to the heavy metals in my system and flush them out. I took it religiously while pretending to decline further. For the next 2 weeks, I played dying. I stopped eating Daniel's food, claiming nausea. I poured out his special tea when he wasn't looking. I weakened visibly every day while secretly growing stronger. And every night, while he thought I was sleeping, I accessed our home computer system and reviewed months of his digital footprint. What I found was methodical and terrifying. Daniel had been researching arsenic poisoning for 18 months. He'd accessed medical journals about chronic toxicity symptoms. He'd read case studies about famous poisoning cases, all through incognito browsers, but my grandfather's system captured everything anyway. I found his communications with the state attorneys. My wife has a terminal condition. How quickly can inheritance be processed? I found his access to the company's chemistry lab logs. Small quantities of arsenic trioxide signed out under false employee IDs. I found his backup plan, a life insurance policy he'd taken out on me 2 years ago. $5 million that I'd never known existed because he'd handled all our finances. But the most damaging evidence was his journal. Daniel kept everything in encrypted files on his laptop, but my grandfather's system had captured his passwords years ago during a company security audit. I read 18 months of methodical planning. October 2023. Started the protocol today. Small doses in her morning tea. She trusts me completely. December 2023. Symptoms are progressing well. Doctors are baffled. Perfect. January 2024. She's deteriorating faster than expected. May need to accelerate timeline. Her 30th birthday is in 6 months. Can't let her take control of the shares. He documented everything. Every dose, every symptom, every doctor's appointment where physicians failed to diagnose the poisoning. He'd written it all down like a research protocol. Because that's what I was to him. An experiment. A problem to be solved through chemistry. I made copies of everything. Encrypted them. Sent them to 3 separate secure servers. Then I called Detective Lisa Morrison at the Boston Police Department. Morrison was a specialist in domestic violence cases who'd spoken at a pharmaceutical conference I'd attended. I remembered her because she talked about how intimate partner poisoning was dramatically underreported and underinvestigated. We met at a coffee shop in Cambridge, far from anywhere Daniel might see us. I brought a tablet with all the evidence. She reviewed everything in silence for 20 minutes. When she looked up, her expression was grim. "This is prosecutable," she said. "Clear intent, clear method, clear motive. But I want to catch him in the act. One more documented dose with a controlled witness." "I have something better," I told her. "The annual shareholders' gala is in 12 days. March 15th, Daniel's scheduled to present our cancer treatment breakthrough. He'll accept credit for research I actually conducted. There will be 300 industry leaders present, including the FDA representatives reviewing our drug application." Morrison leaned forward. "What are you proposing?" "Let me finish this the way my grandfather would have wanted. Publicly, irrefutably, with witnesses who can't be bought or intimidated. Have you ever had to plan your own vindication while pretending to be a victim? Share your thoughts in the comments. And please hit that like button if you want to see justice served." The annual shareholders gala at the Boston Harbor Hotel was Hayes Pharmaceuticals' biggest event. 300 attendees including board members, FDA officials, major investors, and research partners from around the world. Daniel had been preparing his presentation for months, our breakthrough cancer treatment that would secure the company's future and his reputation. What he didn't know was that I'd been preparing my own presentation. Detective Morrison had obtained warrants for Daniel's computer, phone records, and laboratory access logs. A forensic toxicologist had analyzed samples of the tea Daniel prepared for me, high levels of arsenic trioxide carefully measured to avoid acute poisoning while ensuring chronic deterioration. But Morrison agreed to my plan. Let him present at the gala. Let him stand in front of the entire industry. Then expose everything with law enforcement present to arrest him immediately. "You're taking a risk," Rachel warned me 3 days before the event. "What if he realizes you've stopped declining? What if he tries something desperate? He won't. He's too confident. He thinks he's won." I'd been performing masterfully. I looked terrible, deliberately. I'd stopped the chelation therapy temporarily to let some symptoms resurface. I shook when I walked. I struggled to remember simple words. I'd even had a very public collapse at the research facility that sent Daniel into protective husband overdrive. "The doctors think it's neurological now," he told the board with perfectly practiced concern. "I'm doing everything I can, but we need to be realistic. Victoria may not be capable of assuming her inheritance responsibilities." The board members looked at me with pity. Poor Victoria Hayes, brilliant researcher, dying young, just like her grandmother had. On March 13th, Daniel brought me another cup of his special tea. I'd been waiting for this, one final dose that Morrison and her team could witness and document. "I know the gala is in 2 days," he said gently. "I don't want you to feel pressure to attend. You should rest." "I want to be there," I said, my voice weak but determined. "I want to see you present our research." His eyes flickered with something, guilt maybe, or calculation. "Our research. You helped so much in the early stages." I helped. I designed the entire treatment protocol. I'd run every trial. I'd analyzed every data point. But I just nodded weakly. After he left for work, Detective Morrison and Officer Kevin Park entered through the back door. They'd been stationed in an unmarked van on our street. Morrison wore gloves as she collected the teacup, sealing it in an evidence bag. "We'll have preliminary results by tonight," she said. "If this shows arsenic at the levels we expect, we move forward with the arrest at the gala." "No," I corrected. "You move forward with the arrest after my presentation." That evening, I received a call from Daniel's attorney, Mitchell Crawford, the same lawyer who'd been helping him plan for my incapacitation. He wanted me to sign papers giving Daniel temporary power of attorney over my medical decisions. "Just until you're feeling better," Crawford explained smoothly. "Daniel is concerned about making sure you receive the best care." "I'll think about it," I said, letting my words slur slightly. "Perhaps we could arrange a signing ceremony at the gala? Make it a celebration of your partnership." So that was the plan. Daniel wanted to declare me incompetent publicly, take control of my medical and financial decisions, then finish the job privately. Quick, efficient, and completely legal once he had power of attorney. "That sounds lovely," I lied. March 15th, 2024. 6 p.m. I stood in our bedroom, looking at myself in the mirror. I'd chosen a crimson dress my grandfather's favorite color. He used to say red was the color of power and truth. Daniel had wanted me to wear something pale and delicate, but I'd insisted. "You look beautiful," he said, adjusting his tie. He wore Armani, perfectly tailored, the picture of success. "I'm feeling better today," I said truthfully. "I'm glad. This is an important night for us. For the company. For our future. Our future." He meant his future. The one where I was dead and he controlled everything. The ballroom at Boston Harbor Hotel was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, tables arranged in perfect symmetry. 300 of the pharmaceutical industry's most powerful people in attendance. FDA Deputy Commissioner Dr. Robert Thornton sat at the head table. The Wall Street Journal's healthcare editor was live tweeting. Bloomberg had cameras set up. I sat at the main table, Daniel beside me, playing the fragile wife. Board members kept approaching to wish me well. Several suggested I might be more comfortable leaving before the presentations began. "I wouldn't miss this for anything," I said with a weak smile. At 7:45 p.m., Daniel took the stage. The presentation screen showed our breakthrough cancer treatment. Technically my breakthrough, but his name was listed as principal investigator. "3 years ago," he began, his voice commanding the room, Hayes Pharmaceutical committed to revolutionizing pancreatic cancer treatment. Today, I'm proud to announce that our Phase 2 trials have exceeded every expectation. For 30 minutes, he presented my work as his own. He showed results I generated. He explained mechanisms I'd discovered. He answered technical questions with knowledge he'd absorbed from watching me work for 3 years. The audience was riveted. Several investors were already calculating stock implications. The FDA representatives were taking detailed notes. "Before we move to the signing ceremony," Daniel continued, "I want to acknowledge my extraordinary partner. My wife, Victoria, despite her illness, has been an inspiration throughout this process." 300 faces turned to me with sympathy. Daniel gestured for me to stand. I did, moving carefully as if each step required tremendous effort. I reached the stairs to the stage, and Daniel extended his hand to help me up. That's when I did something he didn't expect. I climbed the stairs without assistance, each step firm and deliberate. By the time I reached the podium, several board members were frowning in confusion. I didn't look nearly as impaired as Daniel had been describing for months. "Thank you, Daniel," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I'd like to add something to this presentation." His smile froze. "Sweetheart, you should rest. I've been resting for 18 months. I took the microphone from his hand. "While you've been poisoning me." The room erupted. Gasps. Confused muttering. Daniel's face went pale. "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued, "before we sign any documents or celebrate any breakthroughs, I think you should know that the man presenting this research has been systematically administering arsenic to me for the past 1.5 years in an attempt to kill me for my inheritance." "This is insane," Daniel said, his voice sharp. "She's not well. The illness has affected her judgment." "Detective Morrison," I called out. Lisa Morrison stood up from a table near the back, holding up her badge. Officer Park appeared from another entrance. 2 more plainclothes officers moved to block the exits. "Daniel Hayes," Morrison announced, "you're under arrest for attempted murder." The transformation in Daniel's face was remarkable. The concerned husband vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "You can't prove anything." "Actually," I said, "I can prove everything." I clicked the presentation remote. Daniel's slides vanished, replaced by images of his digital journal, his research into arsenic poisoning, his communications with the state attorneys, his laboratory access logs showing unauthorized removal of arsenic trioxide. "For the past 18 months," I explained to the stunned audience, "my husband has been administering small doses of arsenic in tea he prepared for me daily. He documented every dose, every symptom, every doctor's appointment in digital files on our home computer, files he thought were encrypted and secure." The next slide showed his journal entries. The audience read in horrified silence. "Started the protocol today. She trusts me completely. He researched poisons the way he'd research any pharmaceutical compound," I continued, methodically, scientifically, recording variables and outcomes like I was a lab experiment. Another slide. his communications with attorneys about expedited inheritance procedures. The motive was simple. In 3 months, I turned 30. At that time, I inherit 51% controlling shares in Hayes Pharmaceutical from my grandfather's estate. But if I die before then, everything passes to my surviving spouse. I looked at Daniel. He stood frozen, his brilliant mind no doubt calculating escape routes that didn't exist. As for the cancer treatment you just presented, I said, turning back to the audience, let me show you the actual research logs. The next slides showed laboratory notes in my handwriting, research protocols I'd designed, trial data I'd analyzed. My name appeared on every page. Daniel's name appeared on none of them. Every breakthrough he just described, I discovered. Every trial he mentioned, I conducted. The only thing he contributed was taking credit and trying to murder me before I could claim my inheritance. Dr. Robert Thornton from the FDA stood up. Miss Hayes, are you saying the research data is sound, but the attribution is fraudulent? The research is absolutely sound. I stand behind every result. But this man, I gesture to Daniel, has no more claim to these discoveries than he has to my life. Morrison moved toward the stage with handcuffs. Mr. Hayes, please come with us. Daniel tried one last desperate play. She's lying. She's been unstable for months. Ask anyone on the board. We have forensic evidence. Morrison cut him off. T-samples with arsenic. Your fingerprints on the container. Laboratory logs showing you accessed restricted materials. Digital records of your research into poisoning methods. And most damning, your own written confession documenting 18 months of attempted murder. As Morrison handcuffed him, Daniel finally showed his real face. No more charm. No more concerned husband. Just cold fury. You were supposed to be too sick to figure this out, he hissed at me. You're right, I said quietly. I was. But you made one critical mistake. You assumed I was as trusting and naive as I appeared. You never considered that I might be my grandfather's granddaughter after all. They let him out through a side door. The ballroom was completely silent. 300 of the most powerful people in pharmaceutical industry had just witnessed a real-time arrest for attempted murder at what was supposed to be a celebration. I stood alone at the podium, the presentation screen behind me still showing Daniel's journal entries, the evidence of his betrayal, the proof that some people will poison anything for power. I apologize for the disruption, I said finally, but I thought it was important that you all understand the truth. About the research, about my husband, and about what happens when ambition becomes more important than humanity. The board chair, Patricia Drummond, stood up slowly. Victoria, we had no idea. I know. He was very convincing. But now you do know. And now we need to decide what Hayes Pharmaceutical stands for going forward. This is the moment everything changed. When evidence met audience. When truth destroyed carefully constructed lies. If you've ever had to expose a betrayal publicly, you know this feeling. Let me know in the comments. And please subscribe to see what happened next. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Board members demanding emergency meetings. Investors calculating stock impact. FDA representatives questioning every aspect of our clinical trials. The Wall Street Journal reporter had already filed a breaking news alert. Hayes Pharmaceutical CEO arrested for attempted murder at company gala. I spent the next 4 hours in a conference room at Boston Police Headquarters, giving my official statement while Detective Morrison recorded everything. Rachel joined me as my witness and medical expert, explaining the toxicology findings in detail. The arsenic levels in Victoria's blood were 4 times normal, Rachel testified, consistent with chronic low-dose exposure over 12 to 18 months. The chelation therapy I prescribed saved her life, but she would have died within another 3 months without intervention. They collected evidence from our home that night. Daniel's laptop, our computer system, samples of the tea ingredients. In his home office, hidden in a locked drawer, they found a sophisticated digital scale, empty containers labeled as herbal supplements, and a small vial of arsenic trioxide. Mitchell Crawford, Daniel's attorney, tried to arrange bail. The judge set it at $2 million, which Daniel couldn't meet because I'd immediately frozen all joint accounts and filed for emergency restraining orders. He spent the night in Suffolk County Jail. The story broke nationally by morning. Pharmaceutical CEO arrested for poisoning wife. read the New York Times headline. CNN ran a segment analyzing how intimate partner poisoning was often disguised as mysterious illness. Every news outlet wanted interviews. I declined all of them. Instead, I focused on saving Hayes Pharmaceutical. March 16th, 8 a.m. The emergency board meeting was held in our corporate headquarters, 16 floors above Boston's financial district. All 12 board members attended in person. Patricia Drummond, the board chair, had called in 2 corporate attorneys and a crisis management consultant. I attended via video link from my apartment, on advice from both my personal attorney and Detective Morrison. Keep distance from the company until Daniel's arrest is processed, they'd advised. Don't let anyone claim you're orchestrating a hostile takeover. We need to address several immediate issues, Drummond began. First, the validity of our cancer treatment research. Second, the integrity of our clinical trials. Third, the future leadership of this company. Dr. Thomas Wei, our chief scientific officer, spoke up. He was one of my grandfather's original hires, a man who'd known me since I was a child. I've reviewed Victoria's research files personally. Every claim she made last night is accurate. The cancer treatment protocol is entirely her work. Daniel's contributions were administrative at best, fraudulent at worst. What about the FDA approval process? Another board member asked. If our principal investigator is under arrest. I'm the actual principal investigator, I interrupted. My research, my trials, my data. Daniel falsified attribution documents. I have original files proving my authorship dating back 3 years. Dr. Thornton from the FDA joined the call. Miss Hayes, I've reviewed preliminary evidence. If you can demonstrate clear authorship and that the clinical trial protocols weren't compromised by Mr. Hayes' criminal activities, we'll continue the review process under your name as PI. I can provide everything you need, I said. Complete research notes, laboratory logs, trial protocols, all in my handwriting, all predating Daniel's involvement. The discussion shifted to company leadership. Daniel had been CEO for 2 years, promoted shortly after our marriage. My grandfather had opposed it, but he'd been outvoted by board members who found Daniel charismatic and impressive. We need interim leadership, Drummond said. Patricia, you have the most seniority. I nominate Victoria Hayes, Dr. Wei interrupted. She's the founder's granddaughter, our lead researcher, and in 3 months she'll control 51% of voting shares anyway. The transition is inevitable. She's never held an executive position, one board member protested. Neither had her grandfather when he founded this company at age 28, Dr. Wei replied. Edmund Hayes built this institution on scientific integrity and ethical research. His granddaughter just publicly exposed fraud and attempted murder to protect those values. I'd say she's exactly what this company needs. The vote was 10-2 in favor. I became interim CEO of Hayes Pharmaceutical at age 29, 3 months before my 30th birthday, under circumstances no one could have predicted. Thank you, I said, my voice steady. My first act is to commission an independent audit of all research conducted under Daniel Hayes' supervision. Any questionable data will be retracted immediately. We will not build this company's future on lies. The market responded brutally. Hayes Pharmaceutical stock dropped 34% in 2 days. Investors panicked about leadership instability and FDA approval delays. Several major shareholders demanded explanations. But then something unexpected happened. On March 18th, Dr. Thornton released a statement. After reviewing comprehensive evidence, the FDA confirms that clinical trial protocols for Hayes Pharmaceuticals' pancreatic cancer treatment were conducted with complete integrity by principal investigator Victoria Hayes. Review continues on schedule. The stock recovered 15% in a single day. By March 20th, 3 major pharmaceutical journals had requested interviews about my research. By March 22nd, 2 venture capital firms approached us about expanded clinical trials. The narrative shifted from company in crisis to brilliant researcher exposes fraud. The story people wanted wasn't about a poisoning scandal. It was about a woman who'd outsmarted a murderer while revolutionizing cancer treatment. I didn't correct them. Let them have their heroic narrative. The truth was messy, eh? I'd been terrified, desperate, and lucky. Lucky that Rachel suspected poisoning. Lucky that my grandfather's paranoid security systems captured everything. Lucky that I'd figured it out in time. But I'd take the luck and use it. Use it to build something real. Daniel's preliminary hearing was set for April 3rd. His attorney tried every angle: temporary insanity, accidental exposure, evidence tampering. Nothing worked. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. Arsenic in the tea, his fingerprints on containers, digital records of deliberate planning, his own written journal documenting 18 months of calculated murder. The prosecution offered a deal: plead guilty to attempted murder, get 25 years with possibility of parole after 15. Daniel refused. He wanted a trial. He wanted to tell a story. He was convinced he could charm a jury the way he'd charmed everyone else. Let him try, Detective Morrison told me. We have his confession in writing. We have forensic evidence. We have medical testimony. He's going to prison either way. The only question is how long. But I wasn't interested in Daniel's trial. I was interested in building something that would outlast his betrayal. On March 30th, I sat in what had been my grandfather's office, looking at the photograph on his desk. Edmund Hayes at age 30, standing in front of the original research facility. The same age I'd be in a few months when I officially inherited his legacy. I'd almost lost it, almost died before I could claim it, almost let a man destroy everything my grandfather built because I trusted the wrong person. Rachel stopped by that afternoon. "How are you really doing?" she asked. Not professionally, not as a toxicologist, as the friend who'd saved my life. Angry, I admitted. I keep thinking about the last 18 months. How Daniel watched me suffer. How he brought me tea every morning knowing it was killing me. How he held my hair when I vomited from his poison. That's normal. You're processing betrayal. I should have seen it. The signs were all there. He married me right after my grandfather died. He pushed for the wedding before the estate settled. He isolated me from friends, from colleagues. Classic abuser patterns, and I missed them all. You were 25 and in love. He was a predator who saw an opportunity. That's not your fault. I looked at my grandfather's photograph again. He wouldn't have missed it. He would have investigated Daniel before letting him near the company. Maybe, Rachel said. Or maybe your grandfather would have been just as fooled as everyone else. Daniel was very, very good at lying. She was right, but it didn't make me feel better. I'd let a poisoner into my life, into my bed, into my family's legacy. I'd have to live with that mistake forever. On April 1st, I turned my attention to the future. I called a company-wide meeting. All 847 Hayes Pharmaceutical employees gathered in our main auditorium. It was the first time I'd addressed them as CEO. 3 weeks ago, I began. You witnessed something traumatic. Our former CEO was arrested for attempting to murder me. Many of you have questions. All of you deserve answers. For 30 minutes, I explained everything with clinical precision. The poisoning, the investigation, the evidence, the arrest. I didn't spare details, and I didn't make excuses. Daniel Hayes betrayed everyone in this room, I said. He betrayed me as a husband. He betrayed you as a leader. He betrayed the scientific integrity my grandfather built this company on. But his betrayal doesn't define us. Our response does. I outlined new policies, mandatory ethics training, independent research audits, whistleblower protections for anyone who suspected fraud or misconduct. I announced the creation of the Edmund Hayes Fellowship, full-ride scholarships for graduate students pursuing pharmaceutical research with financial need. We're going to do better, I promised them. We're going to be better. Because that's what my grandfather would have demanded. And that's what I'm demanding now. The applause was cautious at first, then genuine. These people had worked for Daniel, trusted him, believed in him. Learning he was a murderer had shattered their faith in leadership. I needed to rebuild that faith slowly, through action rather than words. By April 10th, the FDA had completed their review. Our cancer treatment received expedited approval for Phase 3 trials. 3 major hospitals agreed to participate. The projected market value, $800 million annually if the trials succeeded. The stock recovered completely. Hayes Pharmaceutical was worth more than before the scandal because now we had proven leadership and proven research. The board voted to make my CEO position permanent. In 2 months, when I turned 30 and officially inherited controlling shares, I'd have complete authority. Daniel's trial was scheduled for June 15th. I planned to attend every day. Not for revenge. I'd already won that battle. But because I owed it to myself to watch him face consequences for trying to murder me. Are you sure you want to be there? My therapist asked during one of our sessions. I'd started therapy the week after the arrest. Processing betrayal and trauma wasn't something I could handle alone. I need to see it through, I said. I need to watch the jury hear his journals. I need to see him convicted. Otherwise, part of me will always wonder if he's out there, planning another way to hurt me. That's a healthy boundary, she said. As long as you're not going for closure. There's no such thing as closure with this kind of betrayal. There's only acceptance and moving forward. She was right. Daniel would always be part of my story. The man who'd married me to steal my inheritance. The man who'd poisoned me for 18 months. The man who'd stood in front of 300 witnesses and accepted credit for work he didn't do while planning my death. But he wouldn't define my story. I would. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? Share your journey in the comments. And if this story resonates, please subscribe. Because justice isn't just about punishment, it's about what we build afterward. June 15th, 2024. Suffolk County Superior Court. The trial of Commonwealth versus Daniel Hayes began with jury selection. 12 people who would decide whether attempted murder charges fit his calculated 18-month poisoning. Daniel's defense attorney, Thomas Brennan, was one of Boston's best criminal lawyers. Expensive, ruthless, and known for getting impossible acquittals. He'd structured the defense around 3 arguments: no proof of intent to kill, possibility of accidental exposure, and my alleged mental instability affecting my testimony. Miss Hayes was suffering from severe illness, Brennan argued during opening statements. Illness that affected her judgment, her memory, her perception of events. She's constructed a narrative of intentional poisoning to explain her symptoms, but the evidence supports a much simpler explanation: accidental exposure to environmental arsenic. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Diana Reeves, was methodical. She started with medical testimony. Rachel took the stand first, explaining arsenic poisoning in detail. The levels in Victoria's blood were consistent with chronic low-dose exposure, Rachel testified. Not environmental exposure. Someone was administering carefully measured doses regularly over 12 to 18 months. This wasn't accidental. This was intentional. Brennan's cross-examination tried to shake her. Dr. Kim, you and Miss Hayes are close friends, aren't you? You have a personal interest in supporting her version of events. I have a professional interest in identifying poisoning, Rachel replied coolly, which is literally my job as a toxicologist. I've testified in 17 other poisoning cases. Would you like to review my credentials? The jury appreciated that. Score 1 for the prosecution. The next witness was Detective Morrison, who walked the jury through the investigation. She presented Daniel's laptop, his digital journals, his research into poisoning methods. Each piece of evidence was cataloged, authenticated, devastating. In his own words, Morrison read from the journals, Mr. Hayes documented administering what he called the protocol, small doses in her morning tea. He tracked her symptoms like a research experiment. He even noted when doctors failed to diagnose the poisoning, writing perfect. No one suspects. Brennan objected repeatedly. Hearsay, authentication issues, prejudicial impact. Judge Catherine Williams overruled every objection. The journals were authenticated computer files from Daniel's personal laptop. They were admissible. I took the stand on day 4. Reeves walked me through the timeline. Meeting Daniel, marrying him, the onset of symptoms, the months of medical confusion, Rachel's suspicions, the investigation, the evidence gathering, the confrontation at the gala. Why didn't you go to the police immediately when you learned about the arsenic? Reeves asked. Because I needed irrefutable proof, I said. Daniel was respected, charismatic, trusted by everyone. I was a sick woman accusing her devoted husband of attempted murder. Without concrete evidence, who would believe me? So you gathered evidence. I documented everything. His computer access, his journal entries, his laboratory logs. I needed proof that would stand up in court, not just suspicions that could be dismissed. Brennan's cross-examination was aggressive. Miss Hayes, Isn't it true you stand to inherit $40 million upon turning 30? Yes. And isn't it true that inheritance passes to your spouse if you die? Yes. So you had a financial motive to remove your husband from your life. I had a financial motive to stay alive, I corrected. Daniel had the motive to kill me. I was simply trying not to die. But you've now taken over as CEO of Hayes Pharmaceutical. You've gained control of the company. You've become quite powerful as a result of these accusations. I became CEO because the board voted for me after Daniel was arrested for trying to murder me. I gained power because I didn't die. Those aren't accusations, Mr. Brennan. They're consequences. He tried another angle. You were very ill for 18 months. Confused, forgetful, physically impaired. How can the jury trust your memory of events when you were so compromised? Because I have documentation, I said calmly. Computer logs, forensic evidence, Daniel's own journals. My memory isn't on trial here. His actions are. The jury seemed to appreciate that too. Several were taking notes. On day 7, the prosecution presented their star evidence, the forensic analysis of the T samples Detective Morrison had collected. Dr. Raymond Foster, a forensic toxicologist from the State Crime Lab, testified about the arsenic content. The T samples contained arsenic trioxide at levels sufficient to cause chronic poisoning over extended exposure, Dr. Foster explained. The concentration was carefully calibrated, high enough to cause symptoms and eventual death, but low enough to avoid immediate acute toxicity that might be more easily diagnosed. In your expert opinion, Reeves asked, could this concentration occur naturally or accidentally? Absolutely not. Arsenic trioxide doesn't occur naturally in tea leaves. This was deliberately added in measured quantities. Whoever prepared this tea knew exactly what they were doing. Brennan couldn't shake him on cross-examination. The science was too solid. The defense called its own experts. Alternative theories about environmental exposure, questions about testing procedures, suggestions of contamination. But none of them could explain away Daniel's journals, documenting his protocol. None of them could explain his research into poisoning methods. None of them could explain why he'd been signing out arsenic trioxide from the company laboratory under false credentials. On day 9, Daniel took the stand. It was a calculated risk by his defense team, but they had no choice. The evidence was too damning. They needed him to humanize himself, to explain, to create reasonable doubt. I love Victoria, Daniel testified, his voice sincere, his expression pained. I still love her. When she got sick, it destroyed me. I researched everything trying to help her. Yes, I looked into arsenic poisoning because I was trying to figure out what was wrong with her. I thought maybe there was environmental exposure. I was trying to protect her, not hurt her. The journals, Reeves asked on cross-examination. The entries documenting your protocol. I was keeping medical notes, Daniel said, tracking her symptoms to show doctors. Protocol was my shorthand for her treatment plan, medications, supplements, therapies. Not poison. Then why did your entries say she trusts me completely and perfect? No one suspects. Daniel hesitated. The jury noticed. I was frustrated that doctors weren't taking her symptoms seriously. No one suspects meant no one was considering environmental toxins. I was documenting my frustration. And the arsenic trioxide you signed out from the laboratory? I never signed out any arsenic. Those logs must be falsified. Victoria had access to the same systems. She could have created those entries. It was a desperate gambit, accused me of framing him. But it backfired spectacularly when Reeves introduced security footage showing Daniel entering the chemical storage facility on 5 separate occasions, matching the log entries. I must have been getting other materials, Daniel stammered. I don't specifically remember. You don't remember removing controlled substances from a secured facility 5 times, but you remember the intimate details of your wife's supplement schedule. The jury wasn't buying it. I could see it in their faces. Closing arguments came on day 12. Brennan argued reasonable doubt. Maybe the journals were misinterpreted. Maybe the arsenic exposure was accidental. Maybe I was a manipulative woman who'd orchestrated an elaborate frame. But Reeves was devastating. Daniel Hayes is a brilliant chemist, she told the jury. He knew exactly how to poison his wife, slowly enough that doctors wouldn't catch it. He documented it like the scientist he is, methodically, precisely, without emotion. He calculated that 18 months of small doses would kill her right before she inherited $40 million. And he almost succeeded. The only thing he didn't calculate was that Victoria Hayes is her grandfather's granddaughter. She's brilliant, too. And she's thorough. And when she realized what he was doing, she didn't panic. She documented. She gathered evidence. She built an irrefutable case. And now he's here, asking you to believe that all of this, the journals, the forensic evidence, the laboratory logs, the research into poisoning methods, is just a terrible misunderstanding. Ladies and gentlemen, attempted murder isn't a misunderstanding. It's a choice. Daniel Hayes chose to poison his wife for money. He chose to document his crime. He chose to let her suffer for 18 months. Now you get to choose. Choose justice. Choose to hold him accountable. Choose to say that in this state, you cannot poison your spouse for inheritance. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. When they returned, the forewoman, a middle-aged nurse who'd taken copious notes throughout, read the verdict. We find the defendant, Daniel Hayes, guilty of attempted murder in the first degree. Daniel's face went blank. His expensive lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Daniel just stared straight ahead. Judge Williams scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks later. Daniel was remanded to custody immediately, no bail for convicted attempted murderers. As they led him away, he turned to look at me one last time. I met his eyes. He tried to kill me for money and power. I'd outsmarted him with evidence and patience. We both knew who'd really won. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I prepared a short statement with Reeves's approval. Justice has been served today, I said simply. Daniel Hayes attempted to murder me over 18 months. The jury saw the evidence and delivered the only verdict possible, guilty. I'm grateful to Detective Morrison, the Boston police, the prosecutors, and everyone who helped expose the truth. Now I'm focused on healing and continuing my grandfather's legacy at Hayes Pharmaceutical. Will you attend the sentencing? A reporter called out. Yes. I want to make sure the man who tried to kill me receives appropriate consequences. Sentencing day was July 8th. Judge Williams heard victim impact statements first. I'd written mine carefully, reviewed it with my therapist, practiced delivering it without breaking down. Your Honor, I began, standing at the podium facing the judge while Daniel sat at the defense table avoiding my eyes. Daniel Hayes spent 18 months poisoning me. He watched me suffer. He brought me tea knowing it was killing me. He held my hair when I vomited from his poison. He drove me to doctors, knowing they wouldn't diagnose what he was doing. He played the devoted husband while calculating how quickly I would die. He didn't just try to kill my body. He tried to kill my trust, my hope, my belief that people could be good. He succeeded at that part. I don't trust easily anymore. I probably never will again. That's a life sentence he gave me. Permanent suspicion, permanent fear that the next person I love might also be trying to destroy me. But he failed at the most important part. He failed to kill me. And because he failed, I've built something meaningful from his betrayal. I've taken my grandfather's company and made it stronger. I've established ethics programs, so no one else can do what he did. I've created research opportunities for students who deserve them. I've turned his poison into purpose. So when you sentence him today, know that whatever punishment you deliver, he's already lost everything that mattered to him. His reputation, his career, his freedom, his future. He gambled my life for $40 million and lost. That's the only closure I need. Judge Williams nodded slowly. Then she turned to Daniel. Mr. Hayes, do you have anything to say before sentencing? Daniel stood. For a moment, I thought he might finally show genuine remorse. Instead, he said, I maintain my innocence. I never intended to harm Victoria. I hope someday she'll understand that. Still lying, still playing the victim. Even now, Judge Williams's expression hardened. Mr. Hayes, I've presided over hundreds of criminal cases. Rarely have I seen evidence as comprehensive and damning as what was presented here. Your own journals documented your crime. Your own research proved premeditation. Your own actions demonstrated callous disregard for human life. You targeted your wife because she was vulnerable and trusting. You used your scientific knowledge to inflict suffering. You manipulated medical professionals and family members. And even now, convicted by a jury of your peers, you refuse to accept responsibility. The guidelines suggest 15 to 20 years for attempted murder in the first degree. I'm sentencing you to 25 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 20 years. Perhaps in that time, you'll find the integrity to acknowledge what you did. 25 years. He'd be in his 50s when he was released. If he was released, his scientific career was over. His reputation destroyed. His future erased. As they led him away, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction. Not victory. Just exhaustion. The trial was over. Justice was served. But I still had to live with what he'd done to me, what he'd almost taken from me. Rachel met me outside the courtroom. "How do you feel?" "Empty," I admitted. I thought I'd feel relieved when he was sentenced. "But I just feel tired." "That's normal. Justice doesn't erase trauma. It just draws a line under it so you can start healing." She was right. The trial was over, but my recovery was just beginning. 3 months later, October 2024, I stood at my grandfather's grave on what would have been his 82nd birthday. I'd brought flowers and news. "I took over the company, Grandpa," I said quietly, "the way you probably always hoped I would, though maybe not under these circumstances. The cancer treatment is in phase 3 trials. Early results are promising. We might actually save lives. Daniel got 25 years. I know you never liked him. You tried to warn me at the wedding, said he looked at me like a possession, not a person. You were right. You usually were. I'm building something good here. Something that honors what you created. Something that proves pharmaceutical research can be ethical and profitable. I think you'd be proud. I miss you. I miss having someone I could trust, absolutely. But I'm learning to trust myself instead. Maybe that's what you were teaching me all along." A week later, I announced the creation of the Edmund Hayes Center for Ethical Pharmaceutical Research, a nonprofit arm of Hayes Pharmaceutical dedicated to funding treatments for rare diseases that weren't financially profitable. Money would never again be the only factor in deciding whose life was worth saving. By November, Hayes Pharmaceuticals' stock had reached record highs. Our cancer treatment showed 81% remission rates in phase 3 trials. The FDA was expediting final approval. We'd be saving lives within a year. I hired a new chief of operations, Dr. Linda Okoye, a brilliant researcher with impeccable ethics who'd worked with my grandfather before his retirement. I needed people around me I could trust absolutely, people who valued science over shortcuts. "Your grandfather would be proud," Linda told me during her first week. "Not just of the company's success, but of how you've handled adversity. That takes character. It takes survival instinct," I corrected. "I'm just stubborn enough not to die when someone tries to kill me." She laughed. "Stubbornness is underrated. It built this company. It'll keep it strong." I also established the Hayes Survivors Fund, financial assistance for victims of domestic violence and abuse, particularly cases involving poisoning or long-term medical manipulation. The fund would pay for legal representation, medical testing, therapy, and relocation assistance. Everything I'd needed when I discovered Daniel's plot, I wanted available for others. By December, we'd helped 12 families escape abusive situations. 3 involved suspected poisoning. All involved partners who'd isolated, controlled, and endangered their victims for financial gain. "You're turning your trauma into systemic change," my therapist observed. "That's remarkable resilience." "It's not resilience," I said. "It's rage with a business plan." But maybe they were the same thing. On December 15th, my 30th birthday, I officially inherited my grandfather's estate. $40 million and 51% controlling shares in Hayes Pharmaceutical. Everything Daniel had tried to kill me for was now legally mine. I celebrated quietly with Rachel, Linda, and a few close colleagues who'd supported me through everything. No grand parties, no extravagant displays, just gratitude that I'd lived long enough to see this day. "To survival," Rachel toasted, "and to making sure no one else has to fight the way you did." "To justice," I replied, which is just another word for refusing to die quietly. We drank to that. That night, alone in my apartment, I thought about the last 2 years. Meeting Daniel, marrying him, nearly dying by his hand, exposing him, watching him convicted, building something meaningful from the ashes of betrayal. I thought about trust and how easily it could be weaponized. I thought about love and how some people used it as camouflage for cruelty. I thought about power and how dangerous it became in the hands of people who valued it more than human life. But mostly I thought about choice. Daniel had chosen to poison me. I'd chosen to fight back. The jury had chosen justice. The company had chosen ethics over expedience. We all had agency, even in our darkest moments. Even when it felt like we had none. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. Wrote something down I wanted to remember. You can't control betrayal. You can only control your response to it. Choose evidence over emotion. Choose planning over panic. Choose to survive. Then choose to build something that makes survival mean something. Maybe I'd have that engraved somewhere. On a plaque in the new research center. Or in the lobby of the Hayes Survivors Fund offices. A reminder that trauma doesn't have to define you. Your response to it does. 6 months later, June 2025, the FDA granted full approval for our pancreatic cancer treatment. Project designation. Hayes Protocol, named after my grandfather's commitment to ethical research. The treatment would be available at cost to patients who couldn't afford standard pricing. No one would be denied care because of money. The announcement made national news. Hayes Pharmaceutical stock soared. We became one of the most valuable biotech companies in New England. Everything Daniel had wanted to steal, I'd achieved legitimately through actual innovation instead of fraud. I received a letter that week from the state prison, where Daniel was serving his sentence. I almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity won. Victoria, I've had time to think. Too much time. 25 years is a long time to reflect on mistakes. You were right about everything. I married you for access to your grandfather's company. I poisoned you for the inheritance. I documented it like a research project because that's how my mind works. Clinical, detached, calculating outcomes without considering consequences. I told myself I was building something important, that the ends justified the means, that your life was an acceptable sacrifice for scientific advancement and financial security. I convinced myself you'd want me to succeed, even if you couldn't be there to see it. That was a lie. I wanted power more than I wanted you. I valued money more than humanity. I became exactly the kind of person who should never be trusted with either. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that you won completely. The treatment that saved lives came from your research, your integrity, your refusal to let my betrayal destroy you. You built something real while I built nothing but lies. You deserved better than me. The world deserves better than people like me. I'm glad you survived. I'm glad you're thriving. I'm glad justice actually worked for once. Daniel. I read it twice. Then I filed it away without responding. He wanted closure. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Closure was something you gave yourself by moving forward, not something you received from your attempted murderer through prison mail. That night, Rachel asked if I'd read it. I told her about the letter when it arrived. What did he say? That he was wrong. That I was right. That he's glad I survived. How do you feel about that? Indifferent. He spent 18 months poisoning me. Now he's spending 25 years in prison thinking about it. That's fair. No desire to write back? To tell him how you really feel. He knows how I feel. I told him in court. I told the world at the gala. I don't need to tell him again, just so he can feel like he got closure. Fuck his closure. Rachel smiled. Good. You don't owe him anything. She was right. I didn't. By the end of 2025, Hayes Pharmaceutical had treated 847 patients with our cancer protocol. 681 showed complete or partial remission. Lives saved because I refused to die quietly. Lives saved because I'd chosen evidence over despair. The company's value had quadrupled. We'd opened 3 new research facilities. We'd hired 200 additional staff. The Edmund Hayes Center had funded 12 different rare disease studies. The Hayes Survivors Fund had helped 39 families escape abusive situations. I'd built an empire on integrity instead of poison. Everything my grandfather dreamed of, everything Daniel tried to steal, everything I'd fought to reclaim. And I'd done it while refusing to let betrayal make me bitter. That was the real victory, not destroying Daniel, but becoming someone who made destruction unnecessary. Someone who saved lives instead of ending them. Standing in my office 50 floors above Boston, looking at my grandfather's photograph on the wall, I finally understood what he'd been trying to teach me all along. Power isn't about controlling others. It's about refusing to let others control you. Daniel tried to control me with poison. I took control back with evidence, patience, and the certainty that some things matter more than money. Things like integrity, things like justice, things like staying alive long enough to prove that good people can win. Not always, but sometimes, and sometimes is enough. Thank you for witnessing my story. If you've survived betrayal, if you fought back against someone who tried to destroy you, if you've ever had to gather evidence while pretending to be helpless, you're not alone. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Choose the moment of revelation carefully. And remember, survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about building something that makes survival worthwhile. Please subscribe for more stories of justice prevailing over cruelty. Share this with someone who needs to know they can fight back. And most importantly, never drink the tea if something feels wrong. Sometimes paranoia isn't paranoia. Sometimes it's just excellent threat assessment. Stay safe out there.